So they all had to be back all of 2017 updated every if you had done it right the first time, we wouldn't be having this discussion. You'd be sitting in the back watching Jeopardy right now with everybody else. I got
Good evening. I'd like to call the order of this meeting Board of Aldermen to order. Would everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Will the city clerk please take roll call?
Alderman Breeding.
Here.
Alderman Duncan. Here. Alderman Statter. Here. Alderman Charbonneau.
Here.
Alderman Mabee.
Here.
Alderman Gale.
Here.
Alderman Ius.
Here.
Alderman Kennedy.
Here.
All of you are here. You have your spot.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. First item on the agenda is presentations, communications, and appointments, and we have none. Next item is public hearings, and we have none. So far, so good. The next item is Board of Aldermen comment, City Administrator comment, and City Attorney comment. So, Alderman Breeding, would you care to go first?
no report.
Thank you. Alderman Duncan.
In the interest of brevity, I have just one thing to say. Yesterday was our regular trash pickup day, and by 5:30, none of us had our recycling picked up. So I went and found that handy-dandy phone number of the gentleman that was here, called him up. Within 45 minutes, our entire street had been picked up late at night, not late at night, after 6 o'clock, had all our recycling picked up. So that was great. So the response was terrific. Thank you.
Good. Is that it? Alderman Statter?
No report.
Alderman Charbonneau?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Just a couple quick items to mention. Last night we did have a fire board meeting. It was great to see everyone. So we primarily do those meetings quarterly. Chief had let us know that the combined fire and EMS our response times hovering right around or just below, actually about 3 minutes and 30 seconds per call, which I think is outstanding. Shows how great the guys really care about our city, how passionate they are, and how that response time really helps our residents. Also, we are getting new equipment in. I believe the new hats have arrived and are being distributed to the groups when they come on board as the different shifts. So things are moving along quite well. Also, just wanted to remind everyone that the Aldermanic Barbecue competition is coming up in July. So if you have not signed up to help your ward out or to be one of the cooks or a judge, please contact the city, look at the city website, contact your alderperson, and that way you can join a team if you'd like to do so. And that is all, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Mabee?
No report, Your Honor.
Thank you. Alderman Miguel?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There was a Public Works meeting last week, at which time there were requests for stop signs at 3 different locations. The first location is at Sunray and Missy in Ward 3. There are currently stop signs on Sunray, and the board recommended that additional stop signs be installed on Missy, to making that a 4-way stop. Second, there was a request for either one or two stop signs on General Grant, at the intersection of General Grant and Missy. The third location was 3 stop signs at the intersection of Harwick and Rusden in Ward 4. The common thread of the 3 requests were young families with children that were concerned about the traffic speed, the speed of traffic up and down these particular roadways. I understand that traffic data is being collected on General Grant Lane at this time, which should be available for the board when these issues come to the board on July the 24th, I believe, is the meeting date in July there. In the past, I know that the police department has weighed in on the installation of stop signs. There is one technical question that concern that I came up with subsequent to the meeting, and that is that the request for the recommendation from Public Works for stop signs at General Grant and Missy was not technically on the agenda. What was on the agenda was for stop signs at General Grant Lane and General Grant Court. The intersection here is, I don't know, roughly 100, perhaps 150 feet further north on General Grant Lane. So just put that out there so that the board is aware of it, and that perhaps legal might weigh in on that, whether that's a valid recommendation. The other thing that I wish to bring to the board's attention is that at the last meeting, the board was presented with there was a presentation on health insurance premiums, and the city administrator calculated that the premium increase was 8%. Now, I understand how he got that calculation, and it's a valid approach. I looked at it a little bit differently. I looked at it in terms of the total cost increase, and the total cost increase was in the area of 20%. The total cost from last year was 1.0 million. The total cost this year is 1.2 million. Again, I looked at it from looking at it from the total cost point of view. The presentation which we received took into consideration that there's increased number of people enrolled and there's a different mix. And that is, at least that's my understanding of the method that was taken during the presentation at the last meeting. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to reserve some comments for further in the meeting if I could.
Okay. Thank you, Alderman Regal. Alderman Ayres?
No report.
Thank you. City Administrator Simpson?
I guess just one thing. Helen mentioned, the city clerk mentioned before the meeting that this is likely to be the South County Times reporter Eileen Dugan's last Board of Aldermen meeting, at least for the city of Crestwood. So I thought we might recognize her. Eileen, how long have you been covering us?
15 years.
15 years. And I hope you'll miss us, but I can't imagine it would be too much. But we'll miss you. So thank you for coming. That's all I have.
City Attorney?
No report.
Had a couple of things. One, I did attend the Public Works Board meeting with Alderman Miguel. He did a fine job of summarizing. Thank you. On the consent agenda tonight, we have the appointment of Jennifer Gray. Is Jennifer Gray in the audience tonight? Okay. Just wanted to let her come up if she wanted to speak about her experience. But the last time I attended the mayor's lunch about a week and a half ago. There's about 15 mayors from St. Louis County there, and it was nice to meet all the mayors. They all expressed their concern about Mayor Roby and wished him well, and just wanted to pass that along. And that's all I have. Thank you. The next item on the agenda tonight is public comment. Individuals wishing to speak tonight may do so. All we ask is you keep your comments to less than 5 minutes. And when you come up, if you would just give your name and address for the record. So, would anybody on this side of the room care to speak? Yes? We'll start with the sir in the back.
No. Let her go first.
Dan, would you like to speak?
Hello.
If you give your name and address
Yes,
for the record.
my name is Patty Lannick, and I live at 7835 Oakwick. And I have copies for you guys for later if you want. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I have come with some of my neighbors to voice our thoughts and concerns about the recent tree removal and sidewalk improvement project. I admit that the tree roots have caused some sidewalks to heave or crack and become a walking hazard. But it saddens me tremendously that my 2-street subdivision alone has lost 6 stately, healthy trees, some of which were over 85 years old. All of them have been providing shade and beauty since our homes were built about 60 years ago. When the subdivision was built, care was taken to retain these existing trees, and in many places the sidewalks were installed in half circles to go around those trees. In all, Crestwood says about 180 trees will be or already have been removed. Put together, that's a small forest. What disheartens me is that it appears that the trees were removed without much regard for the full cost of this project, especially what this will cost us homeowners and the environment. Did you consider how our property values will decline? I wonder if you gave any consideration to the higher air conditioning bills many homeowners will now incur. And can you even put a price tag on the charm that the tree-lined streets bring to our city, or the way the trees produce oxygen, or through their use of carbon dioxide can reduce the greenhouse effect? Despite protests by us Lorax citizens who tried to speak for the trees, they're now gone. You've publicized that you have 1,000 seedlings to give away. Great, in 20 or 30 years we might at least have some shade back. I question how much research was done to find ways to preserve the trees while repairing the sidewalks. Supposedly, we are proud of our designation as a Tree City USA, so I went and visited their website, and I found several options, any one of which would have allowed us to keep our trees. And this next part is from one of their bulletins on their website. They say, dealing with tree roots and sidewalks that are already tangled can be a more difficult matter. The solutions may require compromises, such as narrowing the sidewalk beside the tree, adjusting the new sidewalk's location, or wisely accepting imperfect concrete if that saves beautiful trees. Solutions to tree sidewalk problems can enhance your city's landscape. Brick pavers, tree grates, and retaining walls can be interesting visual elements in the urban fabric. These features, together with the specimen trees which they preserve, can give your town a feeling of quality and distinction. They'll advertise to your residents and visitors that you care about the things that matter. When conflicts between trees and sidewalks arise, I hope you will do everything possible to resolve them in favor of the trees. End quote. Well, I wish we would have done that. Finally, I would like to express my thoughts about the new policy of planting trees 10 feet from sidewalks and 15 feet from streets that have no sidewalk. I believe these distances are excessive. In fact, the new policy will prevent some homeowners from planting a tree anywhere in their front yard, since their homes sit only 20 or 30 feet from the street. Yet in our subdivision, throughout St. Louis area, many neighborhoods have understory and medium canopy trees growing between the street and the sidewalk with no problems. A quick internet search revealed that at least 6 nearby municipalities have tree planting policies, and I found none that were nearly as restrictive as Crestwood's. I have listed them in this letter, but in general, they are similar to the policy Crestwood has had for years. They allow trees between the street and the sidewalk if there is at least a 4-foot width, and if there is no sidewalk, these other municipalities allow trees as close as 30 to 36 inches to the street or curb. Additionally, Maplewood and the city of St. Louis will even plant your choice of tree at no cost to you. In conclusion, I realize that what's done is done, but hopefully Crestwood's leaders will rethink the tree planting policy. I further hope that you will think creatively and find methods to preserve our remaining trees even when they get older and their roots threaten the sidewalks. Resolving this problem in favor of the trees will allow us to retain the charm, shade, and beauty that makes us proud to live in Crestwood. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lanick. Sir, you were next.
As many of you know, I'm Danny Morse, 11046 Wildstone Court. Approximately 3 years ago, I filed a complaint with your police department regarding your police department releasing my daughter to someone that DFS had removed from their house. It took 2 years for your police chief to call me and tell me that that officer was no longer employed. Is that normal?
Sir, this is your opportunity to just give your comment. It's not a discussion at this point.
Okay. After that, that gentleman over there promised retaliation if I continued to show up here complaining about this. I would like to know what that retaliation is going to be.
Point of order, sir. I said there would be retaliation if you continue to use the F word.
No.
When you, sir, there's record of it if you'd like to pull it. There would be retaliation if you continue to call and harass and cuss out city employees. Okay? I said if you wanted to call and cuss me out, that's fine, you can do that. But I will not stand by and let you harass our city employees, particularly when that one city employee, the woman was very upset because of the way you spoke to her. And I find it shameful that somebody would talk to someone with that much disrespect, sir. If you want to call and talk to me that way, I said that's fine. My phone number is on the city website. You can call me anytime and cuss me out anytime you want. But I will not stand by when you do that to our employees. Okay? Please continue with your public comment.
The police board chairman also promised retaliation. Is there anything that I can do? Anyone?
This is public comment. This is public comments.
Yeah, I know. Okay. I know.
Well, this is not public answer.
I would just note that the public comment, the board's bound by their rules, which say that they cannot engage in conversation with you. It's your opportunity to present your concern to the board, and the board's bound by the rules not to answer your questions or engage. So that would need to be done outside of this time.
Okay, I've got records of where this happened. So who do I address at City Hall?
You address City Administrator Simpson.
This guy? Are you serious?
This person right here.
He investigated this for 3 weeks and then laughed at me because he didn't know all of the facts. Mr. Simpson, you got my number, right?
I think I've got it somewhere.
Are you sure? Write it down.
What, do you want to give it to me now?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, then I'll write it down.
314-420-8340. When could I expect a call?
I'll call you tomorrow,
What time?
10 a.m.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the side of the room who'd like to comment at this time? How about on this side of the room? Sir?
So my name is Michael McNeil. I live at 8600 General Grant, and was approached by a citizen who had said that my property had been discussed numerous times in this meeting. And I wanted to come, and not knowing what was going on, I wanted to come and just address and offer to be able to have a discussion. I've been on the Afton Board of Education for the last almost 12 years, so I understand what it's like to have someone walk into your meeting and just make comments without having context. We meet on Tuesday nights, so this one happened to work out. So, but I did want to, having taken some action, having found out that my property was in discussion, I wanted to give a little bit of history and that I'm aware of, and then also offer to work collaboratively towards something that will make sense for everyone. So I have 3 kids, 5 grandkids, and my understanding, and again, this is understanding from information that was passed on in previous meetings, that we would have I apologize, to be a pause, or someone else gets handled. So my understanding is that there's concerns with the intersection at General Grant and Rock Hill Road. And I understand those concerns. It is a very difficult intersection to navigate. When we bought the property, it was very neglected. Hadn't been taken care of probably for 20 years, and we have invested a lot of time and effort to take care of the property. I would say that every square inch of the property is now managed and taken care of in a positive way. We were approached early on because we were new to the area. We were approached by the city, I believe, woman's name was Roseanne, and we talked with her quite a bit, and she came out and visited with us, and we worked extensively with her to make adjustments to sight lines, to do things to improve the situation at the intersection. We also, on our own, 3 years ago, moved the hedge that's been there for, I think it's longer than I've been alive, and off of the corner, and we backed it around and reinstalled it to try to make the intersection, to improve the intersection, and also provide a place for students to be able to get on the bus. There were a lot of students at the time that were using it as a bus stop, and it was not a good idea for them to be out in the open. So knowing that this was going on, or finding out that this was going on, I reached out to my state representative, Doug Beck. I reached out to our Senator Scott Sifton, who used to live until recently at Oakwick and General Grant. They're on the corner, so he's very familiar with the intersection. And I wanted to, we also went down the street and talked to as many neighbors as we could after, before dark, between 7:30 and dark last night, and then in between storms today. And everybody has responded that they aren't concerned with what we're doing on our property at that location. And universally, we're willing to sign a petition saying that they were not concerned with it. I have a copy of that here that I could give to you. I don't know who that would be appropriate to give to.
Do that to the city clerk.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then also I have a note here from Senator Sifton that he wanted me to have distributed and put into the record if at all possible. Should I give that? Should I give copies to her?
Yes, she'll pass them.
Okay. I will keep one. My summation is this: in talking to folks that I know that are in the legal profession and in putting this together, it appears that a lot of power is being given arbitrarily to a single position, to where things could unilaterally come unglued, not by an individual that's in the position now, but anybody in the future, or through personal discretion that could cause quite a bit of damage to our historic home and the improvements that we've made to it. And frankly, the trees have been there since General Grant rode down the hill to court his wife, and the hedge has been there longer than I've been alive. Nobody even in the area can tell me when it was first put in. So this isn't new. This isn't a challenge. And I would encourage, and what I want to leave you with is, we are reasonable people. And I was quite upset that we were being discussed, yet we had not been approached. And that our property had been discussed. We're involved in the community. We've worked with many of the community groups. No, we haven't been in this building, but we are active and we care. And we are not negligent, and our property is not a nuisance property. So I would encourage anyone that has a problem with what we're doing with our yard to approach us, to have a civil discussion, and to work towards a solution. I actually have some ideas that might make some sense, and that we could work together towards a permanent solution for the intersection versus just continuing to go and cycle through what I understand has been a process that has happened in the past. So I would encourage anybody to reach out. I've probably met one or two of you at times at some event somewhere, but anyway, thank you for your time, and I will.
Thank you, Ms. McNeil. Any other comments from the side of the room, sir?
Good evening. My name is Greg Hall. I live at 8722 General Grant Lane. And I'd like to speak on the same topic as Mr. McNeil. I'm in agreement that we should have ordinances that protect the sight lines on intersections. And we had this same issue come up probably 15 plus years ago, and it involved Rock Hill Road and General Grant Lane. And at the time, they had the same shrubs that are there today were there, and they cut them down to like 2 feet, real low. But the problem with that intersection is not the trees and the shrubs. The intersection, it's east and west there on Rock Hill and General Grant. And General Grant is here, and Rock Hill crowns just before you get to General Grant. And it's the cars traveling up the hill is the reason you can't see them. Even when the shrubs were all the way coming down, you still had to go all the way out in the intersection. And then the solution back then was to put in that mirror that's there now, because the shrubs are trimmed down, it still was a problem, and then they put in the mirror. And so the shrubs are not the problem, so I just wanted to state that. I lived on General Grant for since '81, so it's about 37 years, and it's always been like this. In fact, the McNeils actually improved it since they moved in a few years back, where they have moved the shrubs back. And so I'm hopeful that, if I'm understanding this ordinance, that it gives the Public Works, Public Services Director the authority and maybe discretion to make a determination as to what the real problem is. But I'll contend that if you were to take all his trees and all the shrubs out of that intersection, you'd still have a problem. It's the mirror that makes it safe at that intersection. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Anybody else have any comments they'd like to make? Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening. name's Charlotte Hopfinger, and I'm neighbors of the McNeils. I live at 8620. I've been there for 33 years, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time saying what was just said, because I just want to say I concur with what has been said. The hedges are no problem. The hedges have been there for years. I don't know when they came in, because like I said, I've been there 33 years, and they've never looked better. The McNeils have made that property look beautiful. They're great neighbors, and I just hate to see them harassed in this way, because the hedges are not the problem. The intersection is, and as the other gentleman said, who's my neighbor, I don't remember his name, I apologize. The mirror is the only thing that we can see coming. You have to get out. The hedges are not going to help being cut out. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Hopfinger.
Thank you.
Any other comments tonight? Okay. Thank you, everybody, for your comments. Next item on the agenda is old business, and it's a good segue to an ordinance about object obstructing the view of an intersection. So, Mr. Simpson, you want to give us some background?
Sure. The ordinance that's before the board tonight is the latest iteration of what was originally discussed at the last Board of Aldermen meeting. We made some modifications to it to give the director broader discretion rather than try and legislate a rigid sight distance triangle and height restriction. We rather made it a bit more open-ended there so that there was some discretion. We also included some language that require any reported hazards to be investigated. So we're trying to make it clear that this isn't something that code enforcement is going to go around and actively nitpick on, but rather when we get complaints, we'll look into it. It also takes into account the motion that was made at the last meeting concerning the discretion to increase or decrease certain obstruction height restrictions.
Okay. Open up to board comment. Alderman Statter.
Thank you. That's a lovely sound. I'd like to thank you guys all for coming in and speaking tonight. I argued against this at our last meeting, and the gist of my thoughts on it were that the ordinances that we had in place were sufficient, although I was listening to the folks who lived in that area that drive that intersection more often than I do. And so I did go over there a couple of times over the last 2 weeks and make a point of driving through there. I also found that the mirror was very helpful. It allowed me to see. I felt comfortable. There may be cause for some additional signage there, but as I stated before, I think if we have a concern for one specific spot, it doesn't warrant changing our entire code around that, and I still feel that way. Thank you, that's all I have.
Thank you. Alderman Maybe.
Thank you. I guess first briefly in response to Alderman Statter, I'll note that there were some proposed amendments thrown around at the last meeting that would expand the default sight triangle from 30 feet, which is really kind of an industry standard, to I don't recall what it was, but it was 50 or 100 feet or something like that. And I would concur with you. That was those amendments. They didn't pass. They're not reflected in this ordinance, and I would agree that would be a significant overreach on the part of the board. I think in our packets on page 8, you've got a diagram from St. Louis County, and just looking quickly. As best I can tell, almost every single municipality has this 30-foot sight triangle, but importantly, actually, they all have the 30-foot sight triangle, and then the heights, as far as what's allowed and what's disallowed, that seemed to vary. So Crestwood, you have an allowance between 2 and 10 feet. St. Louis County looks like it's 3 and 7 or 15 feet. I'm not seeing it right now, but every municipality, Webster, Kirkwood, everyone had slightly different heights that were allowed, but importantly, there was a degree of discretion built into every single ordinance I looked at, where the title changed as far as who was making the determination, but because roads come together at different angles, because topography changes, there has to be, on occasion, some changes. So even if you look at our old ordinance, if you look at the strike through right after the 30-foot sight triangle, you had some language that said, provided that such sight distance triangle may be increased by the Director of Public Works when deemed necessary for public safety. So some discretion has been on the books for, I don't know, 10, 20, 30, 40 years in Crestwood. The language that's been proposed to be inserted concerning the reference to character of the streets, topography, other factors, and raising and lowering is substantially borrowed from an ordinance passed in the last 18 months in the city of Des Peres, who redid their entire zoning code top to bottom and reaffirmed this principle of a 30-foot sight triangle and included similar discretion for their city engineer. Interestingly enough, they retained PGAB to rewrite their zoning code, which, as most of you know, we've also retained PGAB to rewrite our zoning code. So PGAB hasn't gotten to this section yet, but and so I guess there's a chance that this gets tweaked in the future. But it's the ordinance that Des Peres passed was as a result of research and kind of latest and greatest zoning techniques. I read. Obviously this got just tonight, but I read Senator Sifton's letter, and I think he was misinformed on the scope of the ordinance, and perhaps he was only given a copy of what was in our packet. You'll note there's an ellipse after subsection C. The ordinance continues. We're just not amending that section, and there is an appeal process. So if it's not like the Public Works Director is a king and gets to say, hey, you cut down your bush and I'm the end-all be-all. There's an appeal that eventually can work its way all the way up to the Board of Aldermen if there was some overreach. The current occupant of our Public Works Director, Mr. Gillum, is a fair and reasonable guy. I'm sure he would enforce this ordinance sparingly and only if he felt it was necessary. But the ordinance itself doesn't target a specific intersection. It just allows that discretion in the interest of public safety. And because just this ordinance is on the table, I don't want to comment on any particular intersection. I will say, as a general matter, a bush would obviously cede to human lives. But because you all came tonight, I appreciate you coming and your willingness to work. And I'm not sure when those bushes were trimmed, but I do know at one point they were significantly taller than 2 feet, and they were trimmed back. And I think that help the intersection. I note that you've put in kind of a quarter circle and installed the bench there, and just stepping away from the hedge, your property itself, I find to be very visually pleasing. I drive that all the time. Your home's, I think, architecturally significant and has some impressive features, and it looks great. So by passing this, in and of itself, I don't think we're targeting that home. I will say I appreciate you and your neighbors coming up, and perhaps if this passes, or even if it doesn't pass with the existing discretion given, the Public Works Board, Alderman McGill and myself, we have fielded numerous complaints about not only that intersection, but others in the city. And I'm not sure if it's an enforcement issue or what, but so I appreciate your willingness to show up and say, hey, we're willing to be worked with. And so thank you for that. But on its face, this ordinance really just kind of clarifies the discretion that's already built into the ordinance, and I think it's better drafted than what we had before. I think Des Peres and PGAB did a good job, and I think leaving it at 30 feet and not expanding to whatever distances were discussed last time is appropriate. So I do plan on voting yes on the ordinance, and then as far as enforcement on the back end, that's something we'll take up later.
Is that it?
Yes.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board? I see no other lights. One showed up. Thank you. Alderman Rios. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I likewise appreciate the residents coming up and expressing an interest in working with the board and the Public Services Director. And I have to agree with everything that my colleague Alderman Maybe said here. Yeah, I guess one solution would be to raise the roadway as it approaches Rock Hill so that the visibility would improve. So, yeah, that is an option. I'm not sure of the practicality or the cost. I too have used that intersection, not frequently, but whenever I go to the post office, that's my exit route. If I were making a left-hand turn as I approach that intersection with my car, which is a regular sedan, if I were to make a left instead of, I make a right to go to the post office. If I had to make a left into the crossing traffic, my visibility is extremely limited. When I look to my right, I can only see the very top of a crossing sedan. If it's a SUV, I can see a little bit more. Relying on a mirror to make a turn into increasing traffic is not my idea of a solution. So, obviously, the hedge that stands there now is about 2 feet. It might be a little bit more, I don't know. Been a lot of rain this spring. But even 2 feet would allow me, I believe, to at least see crossing traffic from the mid-door up. So I'd have a visibility of more than just of crossing traffic of more than a few inches. So and as my colleague said, this is not the only intersection that I feel will be affected or might be affected, but to my knowledge, it's the most glaring one, and it's one on which I've received a number of calls from concerned citizens that have told me that they no longer will exit that way if they have to make a left. They will wind their way through Sunray, make their way to Pardee Road, and then proceed from there. So those are my comments, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Alderman Iwas?
Thank you. I have a question, Mr. Simpson, please educate me. If we pass this ordinance tonight, what will happen to the property of those 2 residents? What's going to happen?
Well, it's sort of impossible to say.
I was not there at this meeting.
The code here says that we'll investigate all possible hazards that are known through complaints to the city and or by report from city personnel. So I suppose we would give a reasonable amount of time to actually see whether we do receive some complaints about it.
Okay.
I expect that we would, given what's been stated here tonight by our alderman from Ward 3. So assuming that we receive those complaints, then the director is compelled to investigate all hazards created by plant material or other visual obstructions. And he would consider, as necessary for traffic safety, the character of the streets at the intersection, topography, conditions of the lot, and other factors. And based on those factors, the director may increase the sight distance triangle and or increase or lower the height restrictions of visual obstructions. So it's possible that, as Mr. Hall pointed out tonight, if the Director of Public Services were to conclude that, that the elimination of the hedge, removing that visual obstruction, didn't actually remedy the traffic safety, then it's possible that there would be no further action taken. But this is all off the cuff, and obviously we need to be looked at more closely. Does that at least give you a basic understanding of the thought process?
Okay, and So let's say there's an issue, there's a safety issue, then we reach out to those residents and we ask them to do something about their property, to change something on their own money. Do we participate, and how does this work?
The code doesn't provide any mechanism for the city to participate in the solution in terms of committing city resources. I think there would be some dialogue with the resident in terms of identifying the problem and trying to engage in a discussion to achieve a reasonable solution. Obviously, when you're concerned with a matter of public safety concern is going to win out over the convenience or expense to the resident in the end. That has to be our mandate. But certainly we make all efforts to do so in a reasonable and fair fashion.
Thank you. Thank you. Alderman Charbonneau?
Yes, thank you. I was just curious, who installed and who maintains the mirror that is across the road?
I'm assuming since it's a county road that the county did. Jim, do you have?
I would say St. Louis County because it is St. Louis County right of way and it is one of their arterial road systems.
Okay, thank you. Oh.
Thank you, Alderman Stetter.
I was just curious, do we have any record, or do we know how many accidents have occurred at that intersection?
I don't know. Ron, are you aware of the history?
Yes, we actually did check for accidents at that location. We have handled one in the last several years, but I think you also need to know that any accident that would occur on Rock Hill would be written by St. Louis County Police. This is maintained by St. Louis County. We've made a request for any accidents in the last couple of years and haven't heard back from them yet.
Okay, thank you.
So a majority of the accidents would have been, if there were accidents, would have been handled by St. Louis County.
And the one that we did handle, we just happened to get there first, or?
No, it happened on General Grant. Somebody was at the starting to turn onto Rock Hill, stopped for oncoming traffic, and somebody rear-ended them.
Got it. Thank you.
Is that Alderman Stetter?
That's it.
Thank you. Alderman Miguel.
Just an additional comment on the mirror. I lived on Camelot for 48 plus years. Until the intersection was brought to my attention by residents, I was oblivious to the mirror being there. I really only recently have been made aware of the mirror being there. I think, on recollection, I was aware of it 15 or 20 years ago, but it was totally out of mind until, again, the residents brought it to my mind recently. So I'm just not sure how many residents or people that use that road, looking left and right, think to look up straight to see if there's a mirror there. I just have my doubts about the value of that mirror. And I guess it's of value to people that try that and make that turn every day. But for the person doing it, using that intersection periodically, or maybe for the first time, I'm just not aware of any intersection in the area that relies on a mirror to turn into traffic. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Alderman Charbonneau.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. It may be worthwhile for city staff to look into maybe making a sign to attach to the stop sign that says use mirror across the street or something. That might be a simple solution. That's all.
Thank you. Seeing no further lights or comments, do I have a motion for a first reading?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Maybe, and a second by Alderman Miguel. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, say nay. Okay, so you break down the bill number?
1814.
Alderman Alderman Charbonneau, could you do the reading?
Bill number 1814, introduced by Alderman Charbonneau, an ordinance amending section 24-14 of Article 1 of Chapter 24 of the Municipal Code of the City of Crestwood, Missouri, to expand the area in which objects obstructing the view of an intersection are prohibited within the City of Crestwood.
Will the city clerk please take a roll call?
Alderman Duncan? No. Alderman Charbonneau?
No.
Alderman Maybe?
Yes.
Alderman Kennedy?
Yes.
Alderman Reading?
No.
Alderman Statter?
No.
Alderman Miguel?
Yes.
Alderman Iowas?
No.
5 nays. The motion has failed.
Thank you very much. Okay, next on the agenda is the approval of the consent agenda. Do any members of the board wish to remove any items from the consent agenda? If so, please do so now. Alderman Maybe?
The June 14th minutes.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. So, Alderman Miguel.
Yeah, the ordinance approving the agreement with Custom Tree Care and the Millen Overlay project.
Okay, so we are removing from the consent agenda the minutes, approval of minutes, the ordinance for the tree removal, and the ordinance for the mill overlay. Okay. So with that, do I have a motion and a second for a first reading?
So moved.
We have a motion by Alderman Stafford, second by Alderman Miguel. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Do I have a motion and a second for a second reading?
So moved.
First by Alderman Duncan, second by Alderman Charbonneau. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
The second was Alderman Iowas both times, for the record.
Charbonneu's faster.
Yeah, but he moved it, he hit the second.
Okay. Did you get that?
I got it.
Okay, thank you. Okay. All opposed? Okay, great. Will the city clerk please read the titles twice consecutively?
And we did leave on the June 12th, correct? Correct. Approval of June 12, 2018 regular meeting minutes, the approval of the appointment of Jennifer Gray to serve on the Board of Adjustment, and ordinance approving an agreement with Emeren Corporation, DBA Emeren, Missouri, for provision of information as to successor utility service and authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute the same on behalf of the city. I'll read this my second time. An ordinance approving an agreement with Emeren Corporation and DBA Emeren, Missouri for provision of information as to successor utility service and authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute the same on behalf of the city.
Okay, will the city clerk please take roll call?
Alderman Reading?
Yes.
Alderman Duncan?
Yes.
Alderman Statter?
Excuse.
Oh, sorry. And Alderman Charbonneau?
Yes.
Alderman Maybe?
Yes.
Alderman Miguel?
Yes.
Alderman Iowas?
Yes.
Alderman Kennedy?
Yes.
7 ayes, it has passed.
Thank you. Okay, so the next item is items removed from the consent agenda. And so I'll turn over to Alderman Maybe who pulled the June 14th minutes.
It's a hyper-technical matter, and I'm sorry I had to pull them, this was our Thursday special meeting at 5:30 in the evening. I couldn't get here from work.
So I wasn't here, so I will be abstaining on these, and I didn't want to cast a yes vote, and that's all I have.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion we approve the minutes for the June 14th meeting.
Second. We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay.
And I would ask abstention.
All right, the next item was pulled by Alderman Miguel on the tree removal ordinance. Bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The memorandum on page 28 lists criteria for removal of trees. The first item, the statement has the tree. The introductory statement is the city evaluated those trees using the following criteria. First, has the tree damaged the adjoining sidewalk or street? The question I have is, how is that measured? How is that determined?
If there was visible displacement or cracking of the sidewalk was the overriding factor.
The displacement, I need a number if you're going to use displacement. What constitutes displacement? A quarter of an inch? An inch and a half?
I think, well, I don't know, Jim, were you using a specific guideline? I know most of the trees that were requested to be removed had pretty significant displacement. Was there a minimum threshold?
The minimum was an inch.
An inch.
An inch. The recommendation is to increase the budget for the removal of trees by $5,500. My suggestion would be for the city to review the remaining trees and at least trim down to the current budget. So I will not be voting for the budget increase on the removal of trees. I think, let me leave it at that. Thank you.
Anything else?
That's all.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Sherman?
That's an inadvertent press
Okay.
somehow.
Thank you. Alderman Beatty?
Just an inquiry for the city administrator. The tree removal this year is complete?
Correct, yeah, this is for trees that have already been removed. And it's staff's intention to, because the whole project was $300,000, we have the remaining balance, the $89,755 or the $86,472, to make sure that the whole project doesn't go over the $300,000 budget. It's just that the board approved this original the original contract was $80,975, and we're requesting an increase to the $86,472 to cover the expenses that we incurred with this additional work. And the reason for these switches were that there were some residents whose trees we were able to preserve, and there were other residents that called us up and asked us, hey, remove my tree. So we used these criteria to say, okay, we'll do it.
So if this passes, there's no additional trees being removed this year. This is just to compensate the contractor for, I guess, essentially change orders that were made already by city staff.
That's correct.
Okay. And the original budgeted amount for the tree removal was somewhere north of $100,000. So even with this budget amendment, we're below budget on the tree removal.
Well below, yes. Before we went out to bid, our budget estimate for the tree removals was, I think, $120,000. So, yes.
Okay, that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? I see no more comments. Do I hear a motion for first reading?
So
We have a motion, Alderman Duncan, and a second by Alderman IUS. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Okay, city clerk, may I have the bill number?
1816.
Okay. Alderman Beatty, could you do the first reading?
Bill number 1816, introduced by Alderman Mabey. An ordinance amending the agreement with Custom Tree Care Incorporated for tree removal, stump grinding, and turf restoration services, and authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute the same on behalf of the city.
Thank you. Will the city clerk please take roll call?
Alderman Maybe.
Yes.
Alderman Statter.
Yes.
Alderman Duncan.
Yes.
Alderman Ayuas.
Yes.
Alderman Miguel.
No.
Alderman Charbonneau.
Yes.
Alderman Reading.
Yes.
Alderman Kennedy.
Yes.
7 ayes, the motion has passed.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion for a second reading?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Ayuas, second by Alderman Maybe. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Okay, I pass it on to Alderman Miguel. Thank you.
Bill number 1860, introduced by Alderman Maybe. An ordinance amending the agreement with Custom Tree Care Inc. for tree removal, stump grinding, and turf restoration services, and authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute the same on behalf of the city.
Thank you. Will the city clerk please take roll call?
Alderman Ayuas.
Yes.
Alderman Maybe.
Yes.
Alderman Charbonneau.
Yes.
Alderman Reading.
Yes.
Alderman Kennedy.
Yes.
Alderman Miguel.
No.
Alderman Duncan.
Yes.
Alderman Stafford.
Yes.
7 ayes, the motion has passed.
Great, thank you. Finally, the next item removed from the consent agenda was the ordinance about the mill and overlay project. Alderman Miguel, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Page 63. The cost on the mill and overlay project is being awarded to NB West Contracting at a cost of $625,000. The budget for this project is $578,000. A shortfall of $58,000. If I look at the cost per square yard of the contract, it's $10.84. That's the 625,000 divided by the 57,000 square yards as noted on page 67. The budget was at $9. The budget was prepared on the basis of $9 a square yard. So that's a 20% increase. If we applied that 20% increase to the street presentation that we received back a couple of months ago, and if we applied it just to the asphalt part, in round numbers, we're looking at a $60,000 a year cost increase to our street program, which is what this shows. Now that's the asphalt part. I don't know what bidding or what cost would be on concrete. But as I pointed out, the increase here on asphalt is 20%. If the cost increase on concrete is, for example, 12%, we would be looking at an annual cost increase in round numbers, back of the envelope stuff, of $100,000 a year. So our annual cost would increase from 600 to 700,000 a year. Just wanted to point that out to the board. That's really all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. I see no further comments from the board. Do I have a motion for a first reading?
So moved.
A motion by Alderman Charbonneau, a second by Alderman Aguilas. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Okay, City Clerk, may I have the bill number?
1870.
Alderman Breedy, would you do the honors?
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
I don't come up with a shortfall, 50, oh, you have a $10,000. Okay, I got it. I didn't have that. I didn't have the, whatever you call it, in there, the contingency. Is that why? Yeah. All right, I'll read. Hold on, please. Okay. Bill number 1817, introduced by Alderman Breeding, an ordinance approving the agreement with NB West Contracting for the 2018 Mill and Overlay Project and authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute the same on behalf of the city.
Thank you. Will the city clerk please take a roll call?
Alderman Breeding.
Yes.
Alderman Miguel.
Yes.
Alderman Ayuas.
Yes.
Alderman Charbonneau.
Yes.
Alderman Duncan.
Yes.
Alderman Maybe.
Yes.
Alderman Kennedy.
Yes.
Alderman Stafford.
Yes.
8 ayes, the motion has passed.
Do I hear a motion for a second reading?
So moved.
Second. A motion by Alderman Charbonneau, second by Alderman Maybe. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Okay. Alderman Duncan, would you please do the second reading?
Certainly. Bill number 1817, introduced by Alderman Breeding. An ordinance approving the agreement with NB West Contracting for the 2018 Mill and Overlay Project and authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute the same on behalf of the city.
City clerk, will you please take roll call?
Alderman Stafford.
Yes.
Alderman Miguel.
Yes.
Alderman Breeding.
Yes.
Alderman Kennedy.
Yes.
Alderman Duncan.
Yes.
Alderman Ayuas. Alderman Charbonneau.
Yes.
Alderman Maybe.
Yes.
8 ayes, the motion has passed.
Great, thank you so much. Moving on, the next item on the agenda is new business. First item is a discussion of automatic meeting schedule, introduced by a couple of people. Sue, Mr. would you kind of give us a background on this?
Well, it was brought to my attention by Alderman Maybe that Sunset Hills only meets once per month. And I guess he thought it was a pretty good idea, so I thought we'd throw it on the agenda and see if there was some discussion on the board's preference for it. One of the things he did ask me was, you know, what would the impact to staff's operations be? And I said, I think it would be fine. Obviously, there are going to be some times where we would have last-minute items or unexpected business that was of a timely matter, and we might need to hold a second meeting in a month on an occasional basis. But we could easily adapt, especially with our peak agenda management software that we use. We could easily adapt to having just one meeting a month. And I'm sure they would all, I'm speaking for all of them, I'm sure they would all appreciate having one fewer meeting a month to sit through. So that's our perspective on it. But really, it's for the boards to discuss.
Okay. Alderman Maybe.
All right, so what piqued my interest in this topic was a line in a local newspaper, and I can't remember which one, and I apologize. I'm not sure if it was the South County Times or the Call, but it was a discussion about some of the recent developments being considered in Sunset Hills, and there was a notation that the Sunset Hills Board of Aldermen held a rare second meeting in a month. And I said, oh, that's curious. I didn't know they met only once a month. Dug into it a little bit more, and as Mr. Simpson kind of noted, they generally meet once a month, and when their agenda gets more full than they would be able to handle in a monthly meeting, they hold a second one. Other cities in our vicinity that do the same thing are the city of Fenton down the street, the city of Shrewsbury, and the city of Ladue. Others that meet the traditional, what I guess would be the traditional twice a month would be Webster, Brentwood, Kirkwood, and others. A couple that were somewhat of interest, and I was thinking, okay, that's a difference between 12 meetings or 24 a year. We generally have 22 a year because I think in recent memory we've always canceled one meeting in July and one in December. The city of Baldwin has 2 meetings a month, but they cancel one meeting in May, June, July. The city of Maplewood purports to have 2 meetings a month, but they wind up having 19 on the year because they cancel their second meeting in November for Thanksgiving, their second one in December for the holidays, and their second meeting in June, July, and August as kind of a summer holiday to allow their staff and elected officials to take family vacations. The city of Ferguson has 2 a month, but they cancel their April, August, and July meetings, I guess for spring break and for summer purposes. In talking with Mr. Simpson, I said, with the advent of the consent agenda and how we handle things, I asked him from a staff perspective, would we save money? Would staff be more efficient? Would the Board of Aldermen be more efficient if some months we met once instead of twice? And I didn't know if this is something we'd drop back to every month if the board was inclined, or if we'd do like a 2-1-2-1 type schedule, or if it would just be we always meet on the second Tuesday, and then the mayor or city administrator could direct that we have the second meeting if if matters at hand demanded it. The charter doesn't require us to meet twice. Our rules of order just say the board sets its meetings by resolution, and we decide what days we want to meet. The charter, I think, mandates we don't start our regular meetings earlier than 7 o'clock, but that's about the only guideline given. So it was an intriguing concept. If there was a light month that we combine all of our business at one meeting rather than having 2. And to me, some of the cities that do the 2 a month, but they waive a lot of months, or perhaps do it discretionary and allow the city administrator and the mayor to decide whether to have the second meeting, intrigued me. But I wanted to throw it out there as a discussion topic and gather everyone's thoughts.
Okay. Alderman Stepp.
I actually was not present at the meeting where this was originally brought up, but I did get an opportunity to speak to a Sunset Hills past alderman when she told me about this, and it seems to work perfectly well for them. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't work perfectly well for us. I can certainly foresee needing second meetings in instances like where we're working on the budget. It gives us an opportunity to do that without having to have second and third meetings in a month, or third or fourth meetings in a month necessarily. So I'm in favor of this in principle.
Okay. Alderman Sherman?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. I do have a couple questions, and then I'll think about it. I'm not that familiar with Sunset Hills City government, but their boards and commissions have a more powerful structure, correct? They have more say, more weight behind it. I know ours are to kind of give an opinion. They don't have any, other than planning and zoning. They're more auxiliary or kind of awareness boards. And then Sunset Hills, if I'm mistaken, do they have a little more pull?
I can't speak to it. I really don't know.
As a point of information, I know that their planning and zoning board, whereas ours just gives recommendations that we can vote up or down. I believe they have a provision where if their planning and zoning declines to endorse a project,
it takes a higher majority of their board to pass it then. So that gives a lot more weight, I guess, to what is the recommendation.
And maybe that could be maybe the recollection I was having of remember that there was some of their boards may have more power. I think that's something that we should look into to verify that if some of their other boards or commissions do have more of a say in matters before they're approved or denied, before they go before the actual Board of Aldermen. I'm not completely opposed to the idea, but I think this should be something maybe eased in with where we try maybe certain months that we know are traditionally have been lower volume of items. We can try, as I mean, we're already through this in December or July, maybe if we want to consider looking at doing it in, September or August, with the holidays, kind of for summer vacation, maybe, and ease into it. The only thing that I do particularly like about having 2 standing meetings is I think personally more people should be involved in their city government. I think more people should attend, more people should complain. I know that we don't want to hear complaints, and you may think that's crazy, but I think as an elected official sometimes, it's harder to get a pulse in today's world on what exactly is going on sometimes in the community, and that unless residents come up here and say something, we may not know. It's easy for someone to sit behind a keyboard and make a complaint and expect us to somehow know their thoughts or what they've written. I think that it's important for individuals to come express their opinion, not just in emails, phone calls, but actually let their voices be heard in meetings and be civically involved. I think that helps with a well-rounded society. So I, in theory, would like to give the public every opportunity they have to come up here and be part of the public and participate in the process. So I'm not completely opposed to this, but I don't want to just take away meetings for the sake of taking away meetings to make it easier on us. I think that's part of our positions as public servants, is that to serve the public and give them opportunities. So if we want to look at statistically months that maybe are always short meetings and combine those, I'm not opposed to something like that, a system where we would do that. But I would hate for an individual to come to a meeting and their item be the last item on the agenda and have to wait till, I've heard meetings have gone to 2, 3 a.m. I'd hate for that to have to happen for them to hear maybe an outcome that would greatly affect their livelihood. So I would say that we should keep that in mind, and if we are going to make a move like that. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Alderman Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a planner by nature, so I would like to know when the meetings are. So I would like to propose something, one of the options that Alderman maybe suggested that some other municipalities have. One meeting June, July, August, one meeting November, one meeting in December, and the rest of them keep the 2 meetings, and making sure that I'm not stepping on any budget meetings during those times. That's how I would like to see something begun, and if we're going to do it, let's do it. Let's just, let's make a decision if we're going to do this, and let's give it a whirl. Let's, don't put it off. If we're going to do it, let's do it. Thank you.
I would, say a couple of points. Our charter says basically 1 meeting a month at 7 o'clock, but I think this is a good concept. I think we can be more efficient in the meetings. I think it would force all of us to work harder to prepare beforehand. Not saying we don't do that, but certainly we'd all have to work hard to make sure we were as efficient as possible in the meetings, for the very reasons I think Alderman Charbonneau said about not wanting these meetings to drag on until 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night when we have people that want to speak. I also agree that it's nice to have more opportunities for the public to speak and share their voice with us. I do think there's some opportunities to probably remove 1 or 2 more meetings a year. Right now we're meeting about 22 times a year, and maybe if we did the one on and then 2 the next month type strategy, we would end up with about 18 roughly. So that'd be 4 less meetings a year. So I think I would not want to jump into this right now and make a decision. I would like to see a little more history on when those meetings are, where they're heaviest before we do a 1 on, 1 or 2 on, 1 off type schedule. But I think it's worth thinking about, and I would be interested to get some more analytics from the city administrator on this. Yeah. Alderman Ives.
Thank you. I would like to second what Alderman Charbonneau said. I see things a little bit differently. First of all, my question for you, if someone can indicate me, can we move the public comments at the beginning of the meeting if we decide to go once a month? Can we do that?
Yeah, the order of business is set forth in the rules of order, which is in the city code. So
okay.
Yeah, you could do it.
We could do that. So my thought is, if we decide to have one meeting, we might have a busier agenda. So maybe we'll motivate people to come more than the usual attendance. And then if we give them the opportunity to speak right away at the beginning of the meeting, then they don't have to wait, because most of the time, for most items in the agenda, people cannot speak unless it's a public comment or a public hearing, if I'm not mistaken. So to me, I see it differently. I agree with Alderman Charbonneau that I wish we could have more people coming and speaking out and saying things. But if you have one meeting, it might motivate people to say, you know what, we're going to have a busy agenda. So more people might be interested in what's going on that day, and they want to use that opportunity to come and speak, especially if we give them the opportunity to speak at the beginning of the meeting. That's all.
Alderman McGill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I kind of lean towards your comments and also to Alderman Charbonneau's. I'd be okay with, say, having the meeting scheduled the way it is, and if at the first meeting of the month it appears that there's not going to be anything for the second meeting, to cancel the second meeting at that point. So I would like to see a little flexibility in what we're doing, yet have at least a first meeting of the month scheduled. A couple of concerns. If there's but one meeting and an ordinance were to come up and it would not pass, it would fail having a second reading of that ordinance, then you're looking at a delay of a month as opposed to 2 weeks. And that, to me, is a significant time frame. I think that there's a fair amount of material for this board to cover, and I don't see things getting any easier going down the road. I mean, I see that, a number of issues that the city needs to deal with, and I think it's time to be taking a closer look at the finances of the city. We are hitting some huge cost increases, and our revenue isn't real, at best is steady. So I'm a little hesitant to automatically go to 1 per month. Those are my comments and concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Miguel. Alderman Duncan?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. All right, well, we had a good discussion. I don't see any further comments. I would just maybe suggest that we continue the discussion, maybe Mr. Simpson do some more inputs on months that are busier than others, and
I'll prepare like a recommendation, I think, based on the comments tonight, and give the board something meatier to discuss.
I think that would be good. Okay. The next item on the agenda is a discussion of the design yield contract to reconstruct the fire department bunk room, the police department bathrooms, and the parks and recreation locker room. Mr. Simpson, could you introduce this, please?
Yeah, so these are projects that were budgeted in the 2018 budget, we had the fire department bunkhouse and the police department bathrooms budgeted in the capital improvement fund, and the parks and recreation locker room upgrades in the parks and stormwater fund. And between the projects combined, we had $220,000 budgeted. And when we went out to bid, we had bundled the projects together because we thought having a larger value project would attract more competitive bids. And for whatever reason, that we only received 2 firms submitting qualifications and only 1 firm submitting a price proposal. And the price proposal was submitted by Cosney Wagner. And while we had budgeted $220,000 for these projects, the bid came in at about $537,500. So significantly more than what we had budgeted. Staff had evaluated the price proposal. We kind of wanted to see, okay, were we way off on this, or are the bids completely unreasonable? Internally, we sort of concluded that the bids are a little high, but not out of the realm of what's realistic. Based on some of our conversations with neighboring municipalities about the public works projects that they've gone out to bid, everyone's sort of seeing this result, which is honestly, on the one hand, you feel good about it because it's sort of a sign of the times that there's an improving economic environment, that there's more work out there to be done, and so contractors are raising the bids because there's more work. It's a supply and demand sort of equation. But at the other hand, we are the ones who are stuck with the bill. So the memorandum in your packet presents, I guess, 3 basic options for the board. Obviously, you could accept the total price proposal as it is, and we would just make a budget amendment to cover the additional costs. Staff does not recommend this alternative. The city could reject all proposals and start the process over again. It is worth noting that if we rejected all the proposals, state law requires us to pay a stipend to Cosney Wagner, the only firm that submitted a price proposal, of 1/2% of the base price for the proposal with the highest rating, and that would be $5,375. So we could reject all bids, but we'd still have to pay a small amount because of the time that the firm put into developing the bids. They put forth that investment, and so state law requires us to give them at least that stipend. However, our recommended option is, let's bite the bullet and find a way to get this done. The memo outlines a way that this could be done with a minimal amount of heartache or headache, and at the end of the day, with no net budget impact. I'm going to walk through that because there are some moving pieces here, just to make sure that the board is fully comprehending what the moving parts are. First, we reached out to Cosney Wagner, and they indicated that they'd be willing to perform some modification of what the bid was. So one of the first things we looked at was what could we do to reduce the scope of the project. And in the fire department bunk room project, we identified a bathroom addition that could be removed that would save about $40,000. So we had budgeted $100,000 for the project. The bid came in at $243,500. It would then be $203,500, closing the gap a decent bit. And that additional bathroom was added so that we could have an ADA compliant bathroom that would be able to serve female firefighter paramedics should the city ever hire one. We have in the past, and presumably we were able to make it work out. I don't know what all went into that, but I suppose if the board has questions, Chief Oliveri could enlighten them, but we would have to return to that should we ever hire a female firefighter paramedic.
not that this is a good thing, but I guess it is worth mentioning that for various reasons that field does tend to remain predominantly male-dominated. And while we're always encouraging seeing more female firefighter paramedics, it does not appear that is going to be a problem for us in the near future. So that at least reduces the cost of all three projects by a decent amount. The second thing we looked at then was how could we move things around to make this work. And looking at the community center locker room, which was budgeted in the Park and Stormwater Fund, there's actually available budget funds from the community center HVAC project. The board might recall that this was a carryover project that was originally budgeted in 2017. However, as of budget time, the project had not yet been started. And the board had indicated their preference to avoid having to make budget amendments in the early part of the new fiscal year to adjust budgets for carryover projects that were started in 2017 in the prior year but not completed. So what the board did was we budgeted the full amount of that HVAC project in 2018, which was $195,000. However, we were able to get that project underway in 2017, and we incurred most of the expense in calendar year 2017 after the 2018 budget was finalized. So the bottom line is the city only spent $48,000 of that $195,000 that we budgeted in 2018, meaning the difference, about $147,000, is available that could be used for other projects. So if we take the $147,000 that we could redirect from the community center HVAC project to the $80,000 that was already budgeted for this project, we have a total amount of funds of $227,000, which puts us within $7,000 of the bid for the community center locker room. And on a six-figure $200,000 plus project, $7,000 is, I hate this phrase, but I'll use it here, close enough for government work. We can make that fit within the Parks and Stormwater budget. There's right now in that fund an employee turnover, and with the gap it takes from when that employee left to when that successor employee returns, the successor employee starts, that's probably enough savings there to make up the difference. So with the community center locker room, we recommend that the board proceed with the community center project using available funds in the Parks and Stormwater Fund. It doesn't really require any additional action. The board just has to be willing to approve the contract when it comes forward. Second project is the police department bathroom. It had a $40,000 estimated budget. The bid came in at $60,000, much smaller gap. However, we've identified, I think, a workable solution to help get this project and the fire department bunk room project done. If we transfer this project into the general fund within the police department budget, because it's the police department's bathroom, we could absorb the expense of this project by recognizing the revenue from a one-time legal settlement that we received from Ameren, which was just over $38,000. That one-time $38,000 revenue injection would cover more than 50% of the $60,000 bid, and then the remainder could be absorbed by the police department. There is some savings there due to some staff turnover, some health insurance savings based on what we had budgeted, and I think there's more than enough money after discussing it with Chief Compton to take on this project with just a revenue-neutral budget amendment where we amend the general fund budget by $38,000 on the revenue side and amend the budget by $38,000 on the expense side, transferring it to the police department in the general fund. Finally, we come to the fire department bunk room. We had a $100,000 budget. As I previously explained, the bid now would stand at about $203,000 for a $100,000 roughly gap. First, I would recommend we transfer the $60,000 that was budgeted in the capital improvement fund originally for the police department bathroom, transfer that to the fire department in the capital improvement fund, bringing the available funds to $160,000. And that leaves us with about a $40,000 gap, and I I'd like to request more time to explore a possibility for funding the remaining gap at the second meeting in July. But I think that we would be able to identify available revenues to cover that, again, to make it a budget neutral budget amendment that allows us to get this project done. So sorry for the long spiel. I wanted to go through it slowly to make sure that everybody understood what we were doing, and that's all I've got.
Thank you. Did you think about having any slides to show us tonight?
Oh yes, I've got some pictures.
Thank you.
Thank you for reminding me. I'll be pulling up on the screen photos of the 3 areas in question to show the current state, just for anyone that was curious. Assuming my mouse is going to work. As the projector warms up, this will look a little bit sharper, but we're recycling through the community center bathroom right now. Okay, that picture's getting a little bit better. So I'm not gonna really comment too much on these, just gonna scroll through so you get a general sense of the current condition. The main purpose for the upgrades here was to bring our locker rooms into ADA compliance. You can see we've got the odd, I don't know what this is for even. Is this for drying your hair?
Yeah. It's like a handwriting.
That's fun. We've got just draw curtains on the showers. Standard tile. You can see the bathroom's not able to accommodate a person with a wheelchair.
So is this the bunkhouse or the police department?
This is the community center locker room.
Okay.
That runs through all those photos. Jumping over now to the fire department, we've got the bunk rooms broken up into a couple different areas because it's a fairly significant project. These are the main bunk rooms, and I mean we've got a couple things going on here. I think the major improvements are first enclosing each individual bed bay so that there's a little bit more privacy. Right now you can see it's rather open and exposed. So there's sort of benefits from just getting a better quality of sleep. And you know, if you've ever had to wake up at 1 in the morning, you can imagine what the firefighters experience. And obviously, quality sleep does have tangible performance impacts and safety impacts, both for the community and for the firefighters. The other thing is there will be enhanced storage. You can see, getting a general sense that storage is pretty haphazard in the area right now. You've got materials just kind of sitting out wherever is available. There's not really a great storage solution. So that's the main bunk room there. It's the officer's bunk room. Same general conditions. Rear bathroom area would be renovated as well. And the rear locker area here. So that just kind of gives you all a sense of the current state. And that's all the photos I have. Oh wait, I didn't do the police department, Catherine. Sorry, this will be quick. Chief Compton was really proud of his photos. So I feel bad if I didn't show these. Have these bathrooms ever been renovated? Either of the chiefs, no? Are these original?
I've been here over 29 years and not at that time.
Okay. Yeah. there you go.
I'll open the discussion up to the board. I'll start off, Chief Alberti, could you give us a little bit of your sense on the importance of doing these changes now, and how long have you been waiting for these changes to take place, that type of thing?
Well, related to the city administrator's statement about the bathrooms in the police department, the fire department bunk rooms are essentially as they were in 1974 when they were built. There have been some cosmetic improvements made over the time with paint, new flooring, carpeting things, but essentially they are configured exactly as they were 44 years ago. Obviously things have changed quite a bit in the diversity of the workforce. And as to the one point the city administrator made, our last hire that we made in the beginning of May, we were actually prepared to offer the position to a young lady. And when I contacted her, she had already accepted a job a few days before with the fire district. So essentially it's just a couple of main issues, as I pointed out to Mr. Simpson. It's functionality, appearance, storage, but then also related to the quality of sleep or the available sleep cycle. With having the open function rooms, anything that's going on in the engine house, whether it be morning, noon, or in the middle of the night, the sound just pretty much reverberates throughout the engine house. You know, and what I will relate to folks, especially our residents, the way I relate the issue is if you think about your hospital physicians, and especially during their residency and the long hours that they work, you certainly wouldn't want someone who's been up for 20 or 24 hours being the one to come to your house to take care of your family member, or potentially yourself during maybe a serious cardiac event and things like that. So in order to improve each of those areas, enclosing those cubicles is really about the only solution. We actually looked at 3 different ideas on 2 different occasions, one time back in 2010 and then again last year in 2017. And we really tried to select an option that would meet our needs, but would also hold down the cost of the remodel. Of course, you know, we had some plans that were drawn up for what I would consider a gut rehab, basically taking both of the main bunk rooms down to the studs and then reconfigure the whole thing. You know, we knew that would probably be cost prohibitive, especially pre-1917 and, you know, the funds available in the city. But again, it's just that, as I said, functionally, appearance-wise, and also the ability for us to provide the firefighters and paramedics with a quiet surrounding to where they can go and at least get a few hours of rest to really perform their jobs better is really quite important. As far as the bathroom facilities, the reason that we could remove that portion from the project at this point is there is a private bathroom in the engine house. It is what we consider, or we call, the officer's bathroom. It does have a full locking door on it, but it is located more towards the front of the engine house where you first enter from City Hall, and the 2 main bunk rooms are in the back of the engine house. So it wouldn't be impossible for a female firefighter paramedic to use that bathroom. It's not the most conducive or convenient location to have to go from one end of the engine house to the other end of the engine house to use it. In a sense, that bathroom would still also be shared with at least 2 other people. And really, there's no other availability of facilities for her to use without leaving our engine house, going downstairs to the lower level or something like that. You know, I think on a short-term we've gotten by with it this long, we could get by with it, for a couple of more years. It's not a project that I would recommend that we just let go of, indefinitely, but we could certainly postpone it based on what happened to the other 3 projects and the total cost the city's looking at.
So in terms of like recruiting, the best available firefighter, paramedic, whether they're male or female, does the condition of the current bunkhouse, impair that ability? And then related to the female side, does that also, give us a disadvantage there?
Certainly in 2018 things are different than they were in the 70s and 80s, and there is obviously the issue of a woman basically sleeping in a bed 1 or 2 feet away from another man, not her relative, significant other, or spouse, and enclosing the bunk rooms would offer that privacy, because essentially we would have a department rule that only of the crew that was on duty, only 1 person would be sleeping in each bunk room at a given time. So it would, even though there would be 2 bunks in there, it would only be 1 person from a particular crew in that bunk room. So it would provide that privacy issue, and I think more fit in with the community standards of today.
A question for Chief Compton. How about the police department restrooms? Are those more, is that renovation needed because they're 30 plus years old, or is there a function issue as well, other than a form, if you will?
The only function issue would be ADA requirements. Those the stalls are very narrow, and even beyond that, for an officer to go in with his duty belt on and everything, with his vest, very difficult sometimes.
Okay. And then, Mr. Gillen, can you talk a little bit about the community center and the renovations there? Why they're needed? The importance of why they're needed to the. Does a handicapped person have any other options when they go to the community center? And any idea why the cost came in so high versus what we originally thought?
The reason for the locker room over at the community center is to give us the opportunity to have ADA compliant locker room. We do have ADA compliant bathrooms, but that's all. So, and also it would, for the other patrons, it would also provide a door and for a changing room, and then a curtain, and then the shower room. So it's a more private type of a setup as well. And the reason why the pricing is higher, it's as was mentioned before, there's a lot more work out there, and when you've only got so many contractors that are available to do the work, then the price will typically go up.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Shortman.
Yes, thank you. I'm not opposed to the city's plan of doing the first 2 and then conducting further research on the fire department's bunkhouse. I just want to make note that a couple things. I feel like this bunkhouse has been a point of discussion for a while now, and we need to find a solution. So I really strongly encourage city staff to look at all options. I encourage this board to continue to look at all options, because this is something that really needs to be addressed for the fire department. And then with the discussion, I do actually have one question with the chief. The main locker room, shower area, bathroom that you were talking about is off of the current bunk room. Does that have a lock on it, the door?
The current bathrooms in the rear of the engine house by the 2 main bunk rooms, the reason why I included those pictures for the city administrator to show you all is that no, the small hallway that goes to the toilet facilities is completely open, and the short or small hallway that goes back to the 3 showers is essentially open. There is a equivalent of like a bathroom stall door there, or partial or half door that's there right now, but essentially no, there is no ability to get any privacy or to secure that area at all. Okay. As part of this plan, we included 2 doors in both of those areas so that it would provide increased privacy, increased security, as well as potential odor control.
Okay. All right, thank you, Chief. Thank you, Ron.
Alderman Maney.
Thank you. I'll concur with Alderman Sharman. I mean, I think all 3 of these projects are worthy. I mean, the city has, millions of dollars in capital needs across its buildings and parks and streets and sidewalks. And there's a reason some of these projects bubbled to the top in our rankings. When I was first elected back in 2015, I remember getting a tour of the fire department from Chief Menning, and he mentioned, hey, at some point we need to deal with these bunkhouses. It's one of my top priorities, and then, it kind of it didn't work its way up to the top until a few years later. As the chief mentioned, things have changed since the 70s. I mean, these facilities, the bunkhouse, both these bathrooms are really 44 years old, and a new city hall is certainly not on the table. And when you look at some of our neighbors, Glendale, Rock Hill, you have others building new city halls with new facilities. Those are all going to meet all the current codes and ADA standards and best work practices. You have fire departments or fire districts around us, Melville and Fenton and Afton, renovating and building brand new firehouses. So I imagine not only from a quality of life, sleep, and a working issue, that from a recruiting standpoint, if you're interviewing 2 or 3 places, I can't imagine our facilities are looking better than really anyone else's at this point. So with getting 44 years of life out of these 3 areas, I think it's a good return for the money, but every once in a while reinvestment's needed. And while it wasn't really a concern in the early 70s, I think in 2018, ADA compliance and making people with disabilities feel welcome, they pay taxes too, and being able to use the full spectrum of things in the community center, I think that's important. So I'm on board with the city administrator's plan. I know it's not before us tonight, but I was kind of thinking about this bathroom issue. It's a $40,000 line item to basically have a bathroom that would accommodate the female firefighters, and we don't have one now. So part of me is like, well, there's an easy way to make this a little more palatable budget wise. But then not that I think it would consciously play a role, but if I don't want there to be a day where we're looking at 2 substantially qualified applicants, and someone in the city says, well, if I hire the female firefighter, that's going to cost me $40,000 out of my department's budget, because we're going to have to renovate that bathroom at that point. And so then it becomes a perpetuation where we don't hire any female firefighters. So I don't think that would consciously happen, but I don't want that to even be a subconscious concern. So part of me is thinking that that's something, especially while you're bidding out and the entire fire department's going to be a construction zone, that you take care of those projects in one fell swoop. But those are my thoughts for now.
Okay. Alderman Ayres.
Thank you. I think we need to move forward with the community center local room project and the police department bathroom. Those are important. Quick question for you, Mr. Simpson. There's a budget allocated for the bunk room for this current budget, right?
Yeah, there's $100,000 allocated in the capital fund.
So, can we kind of roll over that money from next year budget and then maybe add the rest of the money that we need for the next budget? Can we do something maybe?
Yeah, I mean, it would just be delaying it really, because at the next meeting in July, the board could amend the budget and appropriate those funds right away. It's just that that has not always been the preference of the board, especially such a sizable amendment. But there's no reason why we couldn't wait to do this project and allocate the funds and get it done next year, other than the fact that that's just that much time has gone by without it being done. It means that rather than being able to do the projects in the latter half of this year, Mr. Gillum, for instance, who only has a finite amount of time to work on projects, is going to be dedicating a certain amount of time to it next year. And that's part of the calculus here, is it's time. If we don't do these projects now, then that's 6 months that we go through where we do nothing really in terms of investing in these facilities, and that's 6 months that goes by that other projects that need to get done aren't getting done.
No, because Chief Oliver said that they could wait 2 years, 1 or 2 years. I don't want them to wait 2 years. I want us to be able to do something quickly about this.
I think he was referring to just the additional.
Oh, the additional. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Another question. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you said that this project for the police bathroom, that the project had a $40,000 estimated budget, but then in the fire department bunk room, you said that staff recommends transferring $60,000 that was budgeted.
Yeah, that was my mistake. The budget is $40,000.
It's 40, so it's the total of $140,000.
Correct.
Thank you. That's all.
Alderman Duncan.
I can't believe that we're even discussing the fact that we can't accommodate a female firefighter paramedic. So that's a concern of mine to begin with. Secondly, what direction do you need this evening from us? Do you need saying, yes, we agree with the recommended actions that you have at the bottom of page 135, and say we want to go with that, and then finalize it at the July 24th meeting?
That's the simplest, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Because if the board was looking to go in a different direction, then we'd like to know what, because there's so many moving parts. There's a couple budget amendments and things, transfers that need to get done. We want to make sure that we bring forth the right items.
But if you have that direction from us this evening, you can bring all that to us on the 24th, and we can say yes, and then it goes out and gets started.
Yeah, it might not get started right that quick.
No, I understand.
But we bring the ordinances.
You have the ability to go and act on those contracts. Okay, because that's what I would like to have us vote on, and I would think that we should do that in positive tonight. So if there should be a motion for that, I would make that motion.
I would second.
We have one more light, then we can.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Alderman McGill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't understand. I simply don't understand how the bids can be that much over budget in each of the three cases. Budgeted 100 and it comes in at 243, 2.4 times. Budget 40 and it comes in at 60. Budget 80 and it comes in at 230, 3 times. That said, I'm going to assume that the bids are reasonable for the work that's involved. Otherwise, we wouldn't be looking at this, right?
Yes, as I stated in the introduction, we did, I mean, that was my first reaction, was there's no way. But as we kind of looked at it, yeah, it felt a tad high, but still within the realm of reasonability.
Okay. Other than the movement of dollars between funds, it appears to me that we have overall a $100,000 deficit overall.
Are you talking about with regards to these projects?
For the basket of projects, for the 3 projects put together, with all the adjustments that you went over in here, it appears to me that there's still a $100,000 shortfall. Rough number.
By my calculation, with some budget amendments and recognizing some revenue that we've received from the legal settlement from Ameren, which we've already got, that check came in February,
right.
And perhaps some other revenue that may be on the horizon, I think we can do this in a budget neutral fashion.
Okay, I'm not familiar with the additional revenues that you're referring to, but what I see is 147,000 already in the budget that can be applied here. There's 40,000 from Ameren that could also be applied here, right?
Yes, and
So,
then there's savings that, there's a small amount of savings that are already realized in the police department budget that will just absorb it. So rather than, when we switch the $60,000 police department bathroom to the general fund, we'll amend the general fund budget by $38,000, but we'll not amend it by the remainder and just absorb it. And part of that's due to health insurance coming in below the 50% we budgeted. Part of it is that we've had employee turnover this year.
Okay, so your shortfall may be even less than 100 that I'm looking at roughly. I'm okay with going forward with everything and making a budget amendment of the magnitude of $100,000 if that's what's necessary to get these projects accomplished this year. If a project has to be deferred, well, let's put it this way, my priority as far as accomplishing the projects would be the fire first and the police second. So that's where I stand on it. I'd be willing to support a budget amendment. I'm not crazy about deficits. We already have a $300,000 deficit in the capital improvement budget, factoring out a new public works facility. The dollars are in the bank. We could go the extra 100,000. In my opinion, we could go the extra 100,000 to accomplish these projects this year. Those are my thoughts, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I don't think there's any further discussion, but we last looked at Alderman Duncan. Did you want to make a motion?
My motion would be for the selecting option 2 as recommended by staff and waiting for the July 24th meeting for the details on the fire department bunkering.
I would second that motion.
We have a motion and a second by Alderman Charbonneau. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Okay.
Thank you all.
Great. Thank you for that. Okay, moving on, the next item on the agenda is introduction of bills or future issues. I see a couple lights here. I'll first go to Alderman Miguel.
Could I defer to whoever else has a light on?
Okay, Alderman Beatty.
3 things, I'll try to keep it brief. Had a resident around the corner from me reach out today with kind of a comment. I don't know if I'd call it a complaint, but he had apparently recently left his garage door open overnight and got a letter from the police department saying, hey, we drove by on such and such day, and at 2:54 in the morning your garage door was open, be sure to close your garage door. And I had thought that previously there had been some discussion that there was a rash of break-ins a couple of years ago where people were just robbing things out of garages, and luckily in Crestwood there was nothing more serious than robbery. There weren't any assaults or rapes or anything like that, but that there was a big crackdown where our police department was trying to get people to close their garage doors overnight, and I thought we were actually ringing on doorbells or knocking on doors to do that. And I guess it's my understanding that we don't do that. We just send a letter after the fact, and the residents' thought was, thanks for sending a letter 3 days after the fact, but I really wish somebody would have rang my doorbell, because what happens when the officer sees an open garage door at 3 in the morning and then someone breaks in at 4 in the morning? So I'd like to see, unless staff feels the need to change that policy now, I'd like to have the police board take a look at that policy, and it was at least this resident's view that a knock or a door ringing at that late hour, while it'd be unwelcome in the short term, that their family's safety was more important than the knock on the door at an inconvenient hour. So
We'll refer it.
okay, unless you and the chief feel the need to make a change now, otherwise if you could kick that to the police board.
Well, I don't like to make any changes in the next 15 seconds.
Well,
we'll discuss it and
sure.
probably refer it.
No, I didn't expect you to discuss tonight in due course. Secondly, we had some public comments from Mr. Morris tonight. Alderman Charbonneau addressed him appropriately. I've been copied on at least a half dozen correspondence back to him, everyone from the city administrator to the police chief to aldermen. And I'm not sure how many ways we can explain the matter to Mr. Morris from 4 or 5 years ago, the situation he alluded to. Mr. Simpson, the city pays you a lot of money to do a lot of things, and I personally would rather not see you waste your time on dealing with a non-Crestwood resident who I don't think will ever be satisfied with the response you give him. So, if you're looking for direction from the board, you did promise the gentleman a 10 a.m. phone call. You don't want to break your promises, but I would suggest you give him a succinct explanation one final time and let him know that if he has further grievances, maybe he could call an attorney or call his mother, but we're not really interested in hearing from him again.
Point taken.
Okay. Third up, it came up, I think, in that discussion, and I do want to make sure we're following the rules, that our rules of order do make clear that public comment's not a discussion time, but it is very clear that citizens or anyone else who comes up to talk to us may ask questions of the mayor or the city administrator, and those questions can be either answered on the fly, or if they require a more detailed response, the mayor or city administrator can say, hey, we'll check on that and we'll get back to you. So I just want to make sure we're adhering to that if someone asks us a question, I don't want us to blow them off, even if it's someone like Mr. Morris, and it's tempting to do that. I think it's appropriate to say, we'll look into it, we'll get back to you. Or if you know the answer and you can get back to them immediately, that's preferable, but I know sometimes that's not an option, so I just want to throw that out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Miguel.
Yeah, if the chair will indulge me to make a brief comment.
Of course.
I would just like to thank the women local for coming this evening and expressing their heartfelt feelings. Thank you. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Thank you for that comment, Alderman Miguel. Okay, so I think we're on to adjournment to closed session. Will the city clerk please read the closed session notice?
The Crestwood Board of Aldermen will meet in closed session on Tuesday, June 26, 2018, immediately following the regular Board of Aldermen meeting, which is scheduled to begin at 7 p.m. at the Crestwood Government Center, 1 Netchin Drive, Crestwood, Missouri. The closed session will be held in order to discuss matters in accordance with Missouri Revised State Statute 610.021(1), 2, and 9. In order to adjourn to closed session, there needs to be a motion, a second, and a roll call vote.
Do I have a motion?
So,
We have a motion and a second. Will the city clerk please take roll call?
Alderman Breeding?
Yes.
Alderman Duncan?
Yes.
Alderman Statter?
Yes.
Alderman Charbonneau?
Yes.
Alderman Mabee?
Yes.
Alderman Miguel?
Yes.
Alderman IUS?
Yes.
Alderman Kennedy?
Yes.
You are now adjourned to closed session.
Okay.